What's going on, guys? It's Greg from ECD. Today we have another head review. This one is a little off the beaten path, and I think it should be pretty cool and a lot of fun. This one is the new Onset head from Element Lacrosse. It is $85. They have a website. At the time of shooting this, the website was down. I'll put it in the description. It might be back up, that you can check out some more information and or buy one when they're available. So this head is from sort of not what you would call a mainstream lacrosse company. I know that Clutch Fanatic has done a lot about them, and it's this good friend that started it, and I know the guy that started it is young. So coming from another guy that started a lacrosse company young, I think that anything they're able to come up with in a head is really impressive for being how young he is, and it's a big financial investment. So no matter whether the head's good or bad or how well it does, it is really cool that someone really young is trying to get in entrepreneurship, lacrosse specifically, and make a head at that young age. Is really impressive. So let's just kind of dive into this. First thing up is the name, the Element Onset. I looked around and was unable to find an explanation for this, and I don't want it to confuse you because the head is clearly offset, maybe one of the most offset heads. So I can't really explain the name Onset, but it is kind of different, and it goes kind of with their whole unconventional vibe. The things that stuck out to me right away that I liked were how stiff it is. So just picking it up and squeezing it, as most people do when they pick up a head, it is relatively stiff, stiffer than some other heads like the Stallion 700, and it weighs about the same. It weighs about 4.8 ounces. So stiffness to weight ratio on this design and plastic is really, really nice. Another thing you're going to notice right away is sort of this unconventional, especially down here, sort of curved sidewall strut, organic looking design. So the offset, usually you see like it's a little smoother or slanted down. They just do a full dip right at the beginning, right after the rail, that drops all the way down. So it looks really offset. I'm not sure if that's because they just have this really curved rail, but it certainly is. And then these rails kind of swoop in. It's probably not my favorite look. It looks a little awkward with the curved rails that make these awkward kind of asymmetrical shapes, but it does create a lot of stiffness down in that bottom third area, so that's good. And then the next thing is going to be the screw holes. This is certainly a unique feature that the Onset has. So you see there's two of them, but most heads that have two, they're aligned the other direction. So I've got the screws in this one, and so you can see they're designed to go in at an angle toward each other. And what that's ideally designed to do is reduce head rattle as much as possible. By having them angled, it should reduce head rattle. So you can see they pretty much meet down in the throat there, which is a really cool little innovation that people hadn't thought of before, is putting the screw holes sideways. The only thing that I have a concern with this design is that most lacrosse shafts have a fair bit of concave shape on those two faces. So you're not going to meet the plastic to the shaft flush. There's going to kind of be some air gap in there, which could create some problems long term. But it was a cool idea and a pretty novel idea. Other thing that I noticed is there's just some awkward features throughout it. You can tell that maybe the people designing it or making the mold just hadn't done that many lacrosse heads. Wherever it has a turn or a kink, it's just sort of sudden and abrupt, and you can see some pretty stark lines as opposed to smooth swooping lines. Down here where the bottom rail bottoms out, and then up here where it turns into the scoop. This isn't a performance factor, it's just sort of a fit and finish thing when you're looking at a really high-end lacrosse head. The other thing you're going to notice is ejector pins on the front. Pretty much every other head has them on the back, so it's interesting to see the head ejected from the tool where the pins hit the front. So that's sort of a little bit of an eyesore as well. But moving on to stringing, and probably one really shining point about this head is the face shape. So it's got this kind of kinetic mixed with CEO. It's sort of a really gradual flare all the way through this part of the head, and then goes out pretty aggressively. So the face shape lends itself to a really nice mid-low pocket that end up with a nice channel. There are plenty of holes. They weren't huge, but they were enough to fit one string through. Certainly not two larger holes at the top that might be good for two, but the rest were just big enough to fit one. But again, they were adequate and they did work, and it strung a really nice pocket. The only complaint that I did have was the bottom string, similar to like the old Superpower. They only have two holes, which I'm not really seeing an advantage to that. I sort of like them to be spaced wider, so now you've just got this really narrow area that the mesh is pulled into and no way to avoid that. So that wasn't my favorite part, but outside of that, the head strung a really nice pocket. So looking at it overall, stiff, good face shape, but a slightly awkward design. But for a first try from a young guy who's never made head before, I think it's a really impressive head given that circumstance, and it's really cool, and there's a couple cool little innovations in it that make it a little more interesting, and it definitely looks different than other heads. So make sure to check out their website, stay tuned to see what they do next. I think it's an exciting company, and they probably have a pretty bright future. So let me know what you think down in the comments of the design, if you've tried one, if you've seen one in person. Make sure to like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't, and have a great day.